you let me love you forever, forever? I wanna love you. Will you let me love you forever, forever and a day, 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 day.
Oh my God, what? We're live. We're live on YouTube. I've been doing lives on Patreon, you guys. So, this work-life balance, I haven't figured it out yet. So I am excited to be here and to talk about this very, very important topic, you guys. But let's get a few of the nitty-gritty out of the way. You guys, welcome. Welcome. Happy Friday. I hope you're getting ready for the holiday season. Great to see a lot of the regulars here. Shout out to Joslo, Diana, Crystal. Hey, girl, hey. Okay. Melanated Way. Beautiful thing. We are going to jump into a very serious topic, something that I've always actually wanted to know a lot more about, and I wanted to figure out what's truth and what's not truth and debunk myths and all of that stuff. And we're going to have the opportunity to do that today with very special guest Memphis and our resident expert friend, immigration extraordinaire, April Holloway. So let's just get started. You guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Bottom of the screen, you can see where you can support this show. And we're going to get into it. And we're going to start by just one woman's story.
Memphis, and many may know me from a role that I played on a television show. What I'm here to talk about is immigration marriage fraud. It is something that I've had to deal with and still continuing to deal with for the last couple of years now. I feel like there is not enough awareness out there and not enough support for people going through these situations. And when I speak about immigration marriage fraud, I'm not speaking about anyone based on their religion, their ethnicity, their culture. None of those things matter to me. What matters to me is the intent behind someone marrying an individual. And the reason why immigration marriage fraud needs to be spoken about is because there's so much complex things that happen and so many more risk factors that one needs to be able to have that information to make sure they're making the right decision. And when children are involved, that is where I, as a mother, need to stand up and talk about those things that I have experienced and also what others have experienced over the couple of decades. Now, to let you know, I will not be speaking about any details regarding my actual lived experiences, as I need to preserve the evidence that I have for the right people. But this is the start to bringing awareness.
And that is where we're going to get started, you guys. Let's welcome our resident immigration attorney, April Holloway, and our very special guest, Memphis. And Memphis, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for just sharing your story and bringing awareness to something that I think happens more often than people realize, right? And so
Yes.
What I wanted to do was kind of just start with a little bit of intro. And I'm going to start with you, April, for those that, if you don't know April, it's clear that you don't follow our channels, you don't watch our shows, but we're welcoming new people here. So that being said, Memphis. That being said, do you want to do a brief intro of who you are and why you are an expert in this field?
Why am I an expert? Because I say I am. I've been working in immigration for approximately 12 years. I'm on the family and victim-based side of immigration. So I'm doing family petitions, asylum, U visas, T visas. I don't touch business very much, a national interest waiver every once in a while. So I do see cases where people are found to not have a bona fide marriage. I have seen cases where there is an allegation of marriage fraud, and I have seen cases where USCIS actually found marriage fraud.
Well, there you go. I mean, hello, Smarty 2x4. And Memphis, for people that may not know you, do you want to talk about a little bit who you are?
I'm just Memphis. I was on a TV show. where, they wanted to, view what was going on in our lives. So I don't know.
Memphis is being very modest.
Very
So
discreet.
like very modest. So I am going to try to help her out a little bit, and I'm gonna go into my resources here.
Oh no.
Memphis is she's a success story, you guys, and I think that we haven't talked about this enough, especially being on the show that we all love and follow so religiously. But Memphis is a nurse. She put herself through school. She is an overcomer, like she said, of the foster care system, homelessness, and if you can imagine and put that as a background, this woman, okay, has put herself through school, has children, has done all the things, and is standing. You know what? You better not start crying because
I
I'm
know.
gonna start crying.
It's just a lot.
Memphis
I
is a
know.
boss, and not just a boss, like a boss, BSN boss. Like she's not like, hey, I'm. I'm not even gonna say that because I have respect for LPNs and all this stuff. But let me tell you, a nursing degree is not easy. And as you
Mhm.
guys know, we've just went through a global pandemic. So the nurses are who
Yes.
we relied on, okay, every day, all day. And then you can imagine an RN, BSN, she did that thing. So like Crystal says, Memphis is a boss. That's all I'm going to say. So she is that part, nurse practitioner.
Yes.
And
Yes.
my understanding of a nurse practitioner is basically they're the doctors. They do all the work, and the
Yeah.
doctors come and sign off. But
Yeah.
what do I know?
Can I add something, Linda?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I was really impressed with in your story, because as you know, I used to be a foster parent, is that you, despite the fact of what happened with you and your mom, I don't know if it's still true or not, but you still wanted to have a relationship with her, and you were still forgiving and understanding of what happened in your youth, such that you were able to to try and move on to having a relationship with her still at that point in the show. So I don't know if that's still going on, but at least I appreciated your heart from that perspective because I saw what my kids would go through with their parents. And it would be an easy choice for a lot of them to just never talk to their parents again.
And it's so ironic that you made that statement, because in this situation with the person that I went through the immigration marriage fraud with, she actually was there a lot. She had my back, and I kind of look at life as it's not what you did in your past, but what you're trying to do to mend things in the future, right? Because you never know, that person that you may think have failed you in the beginning is that person that lifts you up when you really, really need it and nobody else is there. So I just always want to give certain people like that gap to be able to improve and show me who they are through their struggles. And that's what, I did for, with my mom. And, we're always working on our relationships. No one's perfect, but by God, it was grateful that they were there.
I love that. So now that we know who everyone is, and I mean, I'm not going to introduce myself because if y'all don't know, then and just shout out to Crystal she's like Memphis, yay!
Yes,
Like,
I love her. She's
yay!
so sweet.
But
Crystal's also a boss.
But do I also see my name anywhere here, Crystal? No. Okay, so I see where we are. That being right. Oh my goodness. My goodness. That being said, let's go ahead and start the definition, because I think a lot of the times people throw out things and a lot of it is not true. People hear things, and even myself, I've heard things for years, and oftentimes I don't know what's truth and what's not truth. And so I'm happy we're doing this because oftentimes you hear people loosely throw out, oh, just send them back, or take their green card, or take their visa, or take whatever, right? And they just think it's that simple, which is not the case. And oftentimes, too, when we talk about immigration marriage fraud, we don't exactly know what that means. So we're going to start with the definition that has been fact checked. So y'all don't come for me. And obviously, the definition has broad strokes. But I'm going to just read it verbatim. So you probably heard the expression marrying for a visa or green card marriage, and that's specific to the United States because everywhere else is slightly different. So we're going to be talking about the United States specifically. But what does that mean? Foreign nationals might believe that marrying a United States citizen will get them a green card or a permanent resident card, but that is not always the case. According to the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA, several issues may prevent a foreign spouse from getting a lawful permanent residency in the U.S., including marriage fraud. So how marriage fraud happens. Marriage fraud, or a sham marriage, is a union entered solely to obtain an immigration visa. The usual fact pattern is sham marriage. In a sham marriage is that non-citizens and U.S. citizens get married under the thought of immigration benefits, right? And what they can get from coming to the United States. And, oftentimes people talk about bettering their lives in the land of opportunity and all this stuff, right? So they feel like this is the fast track to doing that. So they'll meet all the law requirements, including medical tests, licensing, and wedding ceremonies. But the parties do not intend to enter a bona fide marriage and live as a couple. The U.S. citizen, and this is only in one instance, so this is a specific instance, and I have to do the disclaimer that this is not the instance for Memphis's story. I'm just giving a broad definition, right? So the U.S. citizen is paid to marry the non-citizen to enable them to gain status as a lawful permanent resident. It goes on to say that those who commit marriage fraud could face severe criminal penalties, and we can ask April what those penalties are. Penalties could include deportation proceedings, jail time, etc., etc. Immigration authorities scrutinize these cases to assess the eligibility of foreign spouses. There have also been situations where a bona fide marriage, a real marriage, bona fide means real, fell out, yet the non-citizen forces the U.S. citizen spouse to keep the marriage for as long as needed to gain permanent resident status. So how does the U.S. government monitor marriage fraud? The Immigration Marriage Fraud Amendment of 1986 established the 2-year conditional status for non-citizen spouses seeking permanent residency. The U.S. government requires that the family still exists by the end of the 2-year period to avoid any immigration consequences. Non-citizens receive conditional permanent residency for marriage under 2 years. This will be converted to full permanent resident status after 2 years of marriage. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is commonly known as USCIS, I know it well. I know it well. Y'all remember when I was stuck here? My green card expired in the middle of the pandemic. I was stuck. Anyways, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services will decide whether the conditional resident and the U.S. citizen spouse married in good faith and continued living together. This process could involve appearances before an immigration judge in an immigration court, but it's usually a simple interview like the one conducted for the green card. So there's types of marriage fraud, like I said. So that's just a broad stroke. There are types of marriage fraud, and this is not all inclusive. These are examples of. Marriage frauds comes in many forms. The USCIS has identified the following types of marriage fraud. 1, a U.S. citizen is paid to marry a foreign national. 2, a U.S. citizen marries a foreign national as a favor. 3, a foreign national defrauds a U.S. citizen who believes their marriage is legitimate. That is where we are. That is where we're going to start. That's the base. That's where Memphis has her story. So we're going to be working from that point of view. Mail order marriages, where either the U.S. citizen or the foreign national knows that the marriage is fraudulent, and visa lottery fraudulent marriages, which this is the first time I'm hearing about this, April. The visa lottery one, never heard of it before.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
So that being said, I'm going to move it over to April. April, do you want to talk a little bit about expanding on that definition of what immigration marriage fraud is?
Yeah, so let's talk about what immigration requires for them to find that there has been a bona fide marriage. It doesn't have to be that the person was considering, they could consider an immigration benefit, but it can't be the sole purpose. So as long as there is evidence that the person intended to reside together with their spouse, intended to be in a marriage, that can be considered a bona fide marriage. And just because they don't find a bona fide marriage doesn't mean that they're going to find fraud. There is a space between not finding a bona fide marriage and then they have to have substantial and clear evidence if they're going to find fraud. So we get decisions all the time that say we don't find a bona fide marriage in this situation, and you can refile, you can appeal, whatever. It takes quite a bit for USCIS to get to the point that they find that there was fraud. So at that point, it takes quite a bit for them to get to that point that they're going to find fraud. That is typically going to take subpoenas, some house visits, unless there is a true, clear, and convincing bit of evidence. And the case that comes to mind for me is, if you guys remember Eve, who married Muhammad, he sent text messages to another woman saying, just wait until I get my residency card, and then I can leave this woman and I can be with you.
Yeah. That's a great example, actually. It's a really great example to put in perspective. Yeah.
Now, we watching the show, and it doesn't look like, from our perspective, he's that interested in that marriage. That it's of itself is not marriage fraud, but that text is.
Gotcha. So even if someone, so what you're saying, April, just so that I'm clear, is that even if someone presents in their actions like they're not 100% in the marriage, unless you have tangible evidence, then it's very hard to prove it to USCIS. Is that
It's
correct?
very hard. They can add up circumstantial things, but it has to be a lot unless you have a very direct thing. So, for example, if you have, let's go back to bona fide marriage. Bona fide marriage, they want to see financial entanglement. They want to see that you're participating in activities together with extended family. If you have extended family, they want to see children born into the marriage. In my opinion, they overemphasize the birth of children as a bona fide marriage to the point where people end up having kids that they don't really intend to take care of. But that for them is a major factor. So those are things they look for to say that this is a bona fide marriage. Circumstantial things that they can look at to say that, we're teeter-tottering on marriage fraud here is if after the divorce of the couple, the immigrant spouse goes back and marries someone that they were previously married to or previously had a relationship with. Oh. That's one of those circumstantial things that happens more often than you think.
Oh, wow.
Other circumstantial things would be if there's not a unilateral agreement to pay money, but every single time the marriage becomes threatened, they want to give hush money.
Gotcha.
Like, just stay with me. I'm going to give you this money.
Gotcha.
Okay. If you have multiple circumstantial things that line up, then they can find marriage fraud, but they're generally going to want to see something overwhelming.
Now, would it still, so let's say that's the situation where someone is like, okay, I'm going to pay you to be quiet. Does the person that takes the money, does that affect the situation?
Well, so it depends. If it is a U.S. citizen that's taking the money, the U.S. citizen probably is not going to see any repercussions from it, to be quite honest with you, unless they're
no repercussions.
They're generally not going to see any repercussions from that. If it's a green card holder, they could.
Gotcha. Now, you said something about children. I want to circle back to that. Is the emphasis on having children the same as anchor children? Because that's something that I've heard a lot as well.
So the reason why they're overemphasizing the birth of children is because it's the only direct evidence we have that that the marriage is consummated. So they overemphasize the birth of children as proof of sexual relationship.
So what is anchor children then?
There is no such thing.
Oh,
It is literally I hate when people talk about anchor babies. It is not a thing.
oh, but I hear it all the time though.
I know. It drives me insane. There is no way that you can get residency just because you have a U.S. citizen child. It's frustrating. It is a Republican talking point
Oh,
to try and punish women who are having children as immigrants.
I had no idea. Like honestly, this is the first time I'm hearing that. Did you know that Memphis?
So I heard a different type of way from, so I don't want to start getting deep into some other stuff, so I'll just wait.
You'll wait. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to jump into the comments. Vanessa says, "Hey, Linda, April, Memphis, good to see you all today." Dollface Morris says, "Hello, Linda and April, just here to support my girl Memphis."
My bad, Mom.
Okay, so we Colty's what is this? Colty's what?
Well, I don't have a license to practice in Canada, so that's a non-starter.
Yeah, Diana, we'll have to circle back to that. I know I'm Canadian and she's living in my hometown, but we're gonna stick to this right here. Yeah, Crystal said, "I've heard people think it's a real thing. I've seen it a lot." Yeah, I thought it was real. It's not. You taught me something new. Okay, so let's pull this up, April, as we continue to talk about what exactly immigration marriage fraud is before we move forward. Do you want to tell the viewers what this is?
Yes. So keep in mind that we're all in different jurisdictions. Immigration law is supposed to be federal. It's really not. It's guided by circuits. So keeping in mind that all three of us are in different jurisdictions, this is one case that I pulled that talks about the standard required to show marriage fraud.
Okay.
And that standard is substantial and probative evidence, which is more than a preponderance, but less than clear and convincing. So if you try to compare it to like a criminal standard, in criminal cases, you have to find that there's the person committed the crime without a reasonable doubt, right? This is higher than that standard.
We're going to stop for a second because they really want to hear you, April. Apparently you have a little bit of an echo.
Oh. Okay, how's that?
Now I hear it. I didn't hear it before. Go back to whatever it was before.
Okay, how am I now?
I don't mind this. So you guys, I don't mind this. Let me know in the comments if you're hearing still an echo, but let's go through this. So this is a matter of piecing beneficiary of a visa petition filed by Riwaj Anand Singh, who's the petitioner. Does anyone else have another YouTube tab open? No, I don't.
I have some other tabs open. I'll just close those. But they're not YouTube. I'm going to try one last thing.
Okay.
Okay, I just unplugged my mic. How's that?
Better.
Yeah.
Okay, I unplugged my mic.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes.
One of these, what point do you want to go through on this?
Oh, that was it. I just wanted to show you the standard. That was all. I don't want to like go through the case or anything like that. I just want to show you that it's a pretty high standard so that when you hear people say, get his green card taken away, or we watch like Danielle harassing Muhammad with her big binder of trying to get an annulment to get him deported. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to establish marriage fraud.
As I'm reading through it, it's quite a bit actually, right? Substantial and probative evidence, and it says the evidence has to be more than probably true that the marriage is fraudulent.
Correct.
Wow. Okay, so we've established what immigration marriage fraud is, and so I'm going to start with you, April. What do you do if you find yourself in this situation?
Well, you have options. The echo's back, isn't it?
No. Is it?
A little.
You have options ranging from you're not going to do anything. Some people choose to do nothing for a variety of reasons. Maybe they share children and they, don't want the other person to be deported. Maybe they just don't really care that much. You can also take more aggressive options. You can contact USCIS. Generally by mail is going to be the best way to contact them. Even if you don't get a response back from USCIS, anything that you send goes into that person's A file so that when they apply to remove conditions from their residency, or when they apply to renew their residency, or when they apply for citizenship even, it gets reviewed again each time. And even though you personally may not know the results of that correspondence ever, something may be being done about it. So in a lot of the cases where I've seen where an individual mailed a letter into USCIS, no response was ever sent to them. And unless they know that person's family or have a reason to still be involved in their life, they're not going to know the outcome. And I think that really eats people up on the inside sometimes. But USCIS has no obligation to communicate back with you.
Wow. I want to jump over to Memphis. In Memphis, I wanted you to maybe share your story as much or as little as you can so that we can put it in context as we move forward in this important discussion.
All right. Well, I think it's important that April touch a little bit on the difference between a CR1 and like a K1 visa, because that will give people a little bit more idea of the difference between my situation and maybe most of the other people on the show.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What are the differences, April, between a CR1 visa and a K1 visa?
So when you're watching the typical 90-Day Fiancé story, we're watching people who are applying for K visas, which are a fiancé visa. That means the person's going to arrive in the United States and then they have 90 days to get married. That's where the title of the show comes from, 90-Day Fiancé. After they get married in that 90 days, they can then apply for residency. If the marriage is less than 2 years, the time the residency is granted, they're going to get a CR1, a conditional residency. If the marriage is over 2 years at the time that it's the visa is approved, then they're going to get a 10-year residency, IR1. So what's different about Memphis's case is because they got married first, there was no K visa. That means when Hamza arrived in the United States, he arrived as a resident.
Oh.
With conditions.
A resident without stepping foot in the U.S.?
Correct. So what happens is you go to your consular interview, you get a stamp in your passport, which is a provisional entry into the U.S. During that time, it's very important. You cannot change anything about your status when you're going from that consular interview to the time that you enter the United States. I want to give a really quick example because this happens a lot. So let's say that you got approved because one of your parents filed a petition for you, and they filed a petition for you as an unmarried child. Well, what happens sometimes is people will go to their interview, they get approved, and then before they actually come into the US, they get married because they think I'm going to get married real quick. And then when I get to the US, I'll file a petition for my spouse. Well, guess what? Your visa is no longer valid because you were approved as an unmarried child. So now once you arrive to the door of the US, you've changed your status.
Can we circle back? Because I'm stuck and shocked. So you can get married and never step foot in the United States of America and become a resident and then fly to the US and boom, you're a resident day one already?
So he had a provisional grant.
Conditional, yeah.
Yeah, well, just for the flight. Yeah, and then once he arrived in the US, he's a conditional resident.
Okay, so then I guess my question is, what would stop anyone who wants to quote unquote better their life from entering into a fraudulent marriage? Had I known that, not that I would do it, but I mean, if people know that, then what stops them from doing that?
Linda, people do know that.
Oh, well, so that's why they do it, and that's why it's so rampant?
We've seen this. Mm-hmm. We've seen this on the show. We remember the older lady that we all loved with the fans and the fanfare?
Oh, Debbie.
Debbie. And the guy basically, like, he couldn't keep up with the facade anymore. And was just like, I'm just waiting for you to take me to the US.
That's true, but he was a ding dong, so I didn't really even think that was going to go past the season. I'm shocked.
No, people know that. And that's why sometimes people will advocate for doing a marriage in their home country and then filing for the visa as opposed to doing a K visa, because it's less time that they have to spend with you to put up with you to get their residence.
Yeah.
So with my situation, right, the conditional residency, that individual will still have to remove the conditions, try to do that without me, and so petition on his own. But then, like April says, making sure that those documents are there to prove that there was, bona fide marriage or whatnot. But yeah, so that is definitely a thing that obviously a lot more people know than, I guess, the US or what we look at, I guess. I don't know,
I'm shocked, and I'm not the only one. Crystal's like, oh, interesting. Passport bros. So much is clicking for me right now. Tatiana says, yeah, like I had no idea, but you know what? I think that if you go, and I'm saying allegedly, but if you allegedly go into a situation knowing how to game the system, then you're going to game the system. Like, what do you have to lose? They can either say no, or you can be a resident and never have been in America before. That's blowing my mind. It's blowing my mind.
So that's why I decided to start talking, because before I even really came out with everything and I was going through my thing and they were posting him and his sister and stuff like that, people were writing me. I guess there's like this whole underground thing where a lot of individuals from certain areas and countries, they talk to each other and they kind of game each other on how to do certain things.
I'm just like shocked. April, I know we talked about this while we talk about 90 Day Fiance, but for those of you guys that haven't been here and it's been a minute, what are the hot countries, April, that you find that there are kind of like a little bit of a questionable marriages? Because you've talked about this before.
Yeah, so some of the countries that the U.S. government has identified as having a high degree of fraudulent marriages are the Dominican Republic, Morocco, Nigeria,
Egypt.
So Canada has a special one for the individual. From the Tunisian, they actually literally have a whole warning for the travel. So they have a problem over there with I guess some of the individuals from Tunisia. So
is it related to like love fraud?
They actually have I actually have a link. I should have sent it to Linda. It just states for older women. Oh, I can hear the echo. Can you hear it?
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. That specifically states that, older women need to be careful about that, region of men, because they try to gain access and they end up pretty much being broke or going bankrupt. So yeah, it's a huge financial strain, I guess, on Canada.
Y'all, you guys are blowing my mind right now. Okay, so we talked about the K1 visa. So the K1 visa is the fiance visa. The CR1 visa is the conditional visa they get after they've been married, right?
Yeah, if the marriage is less than 2 years old, then they get a conditional residency, which is 2 years long.
And how is that different than having like a spousal visa? Because Michael and Angela, right, got married, and then the K1 visa didn't work for them, so then she wanted to apply for a spousal visa. What is that called? Just spousal visa?
So they're both spousal visas. It's just that one is conditional and for 2 years, and the other one is permanent for 10 years.
Gotcha.
So they're both spousal visas. But at the end of that 2 years, when you want to move from the conditional residency to the permanent residency for 10 years, you have to either be filing jointly with your spouse that you're still living together and a married couple, or you have to ask for a waiver of the joint filing.
Got it. So back to you, Memphis. So we are in a situation where there has been a conditional CR1 visa granted. Do you want to take it from there?
So first and foremost, I kind of want to talk a little bit about kind of some quick like red flags. And I don't even like to use that word, right? But some things that I want women, and of course I'm saying women because I'm a woman, so that's the perspective that I can give, is to be very cognizant and not thinking that if the family seems involved, then it's a real thing. Especially, us in the US, we look at certain cultures and we're like, oh, if the family's involved because they like to usually stay with their own, then they're really accepting. Then they probably really love you. So then you get that thought in your mind. If the mom and the sister and the brother or whatnot are involved, right, then you think that it's going to be more bona fide. But that doesn't mean that. What it means that you're a meal ticket, so you're an investment. And so if you don't really look at that or notice that, then, it can sweep you off your feet, right?
Mm.
Another thing, that we do in relationships, even in the US, we have to be careful, but more because there's risk international, is giving away too much information about ourselves, right? Right, too early. I'm talking about abandonment issues, your home life, things that you think are going to bring you together and understand each other actually are things that they're going to use against you or can use against you, right? You don't have a family, you don't have that good connection. So then they're going to give that to you, right? So then it clouds all these other thoughts or, anything that someone else is going to tell you about this person, because you know what? They're giving you everything that you're telling them that you need.
Using it. That is 100%. Not only like just gaslighting, but it's very manipulative. I want to go ahead and love you, Memphis. So proud of you to speak up, right? It can't be easy, right? Because relationships are hard as it is. Marriages are even harder, but to be in a specific situation and also be a public figure, we all applaud you for sharing your story, but you're also helping someone. Someone's going to see this video and be like, oh, you know what? Just like me, like, what? You could be a resident. What? So, Tom in Australia, when you're like, oh, I want to marry Lisa. Let's get married, but I'm not going to come and see you until I got my conditional. Nah, fool. I know better now. So there's no Tom, you guys, so just calm down.
Sure.
I made it up. Y'all know that I'm a creative, so don't come for me about nonsense. Okay, so let's go back on point with the visa. So we're clear on the K1 visa, the CR1 conditional, and then also 10-year visa, which are both spousal visas. One of the things I did want to ask you, April, is it, since we're all, talking about this, so Michael and Angela, is Michael ever going to be able to come to America, or is it because Nigeria is one of the countries that you talked about that's on the list at USCIS that he may never come?
I honestly have no idea what's going on with his case. I'm starting to speculate that maybe she didn't even file it. And because there has been a backlog in Nigeria. They did take quite a while to clear out their COVID backlog, but he shouldn't be waiting this long. So either she didn't file when she said she did, or she never filed, or there's something that's happening in his background that was also the same reason that he couldn't get cleared for the fiance visa. Because, it doesn't have to be, USCIS doesn't say you have to have a good relationship. They said you had to have a bona fide relationship.
Can we talk about the financial component of it as well? Not the, like, once they're here in America and they can't work for X amount of time. Although with the CR1, he could get a job immediately.
Right.
Okay, but for those that don't have the CR1, like they're on the K1 and they're waiting, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the cost it takes to get these visas. Can we talk a little bit about that, April?
So there's filing fees associated with everything. The filing fee associated with the first petition is $535. The filing fee for the adjustment of status, if you're doing it here in the US, is $1225. If you're doing a consular process, the filing fees are $120 and $325. And then you also have to pay for a medical exam. You also have to pay for police clearance reports. It's pretty expensive.
And is that if you're doing it on your own, not including lawyer fees like yourself?
Yeah, those are just the USCIS fees and state fees. So if you're hiring for that process for K1 and adjustment of status, you're looking at $3,500 to $10,000 additional. So it's a pretty expensive process. Most of the time, we see our 90-day couples doing it on their own.
And I mean, I don't know if this is a legitimate question, but does it tend to be the Americans or the citizens that are paying these fees?
It does, because we usually see countries that don't have a conversion rate where they're ever really going to be able to pay those fees. We've had one guy from Spain that I remember. Everyone else is dealing with currency that's going to be a very hard conversion.
Wow. Okay, so back to you, Memphis.
Oh, Lord.
So we're back to you. We've passed the visa process. We've passed the conditional component of it. Do we want to now talk a little bit about what it looks like, what's next? And that can be Memphis or April. So we're here. The marriage doesn't work out. Where do we go?
Memphis, you want me to talk?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. The people want to hear from you.
Okay. So I would like to revert back, and it's not that the marriage did not work out, it's that on one end, the person was not wanting a marriage.
Let me correct myself. Yes.
Like I said, I would never talk about something that is not true to facts. Period. It's a waste of time and energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say another thing. Okay, this is a key factor because I was so dumb. Okay, I just was. When a person wants to come over here and it's for more of a permanent reason, not because of you, they're not going to want to do a travel visa, okay? Or like they don't want to do anything that's going to be temporary, right? They're going to make any type of excuse to be like, no, that's not going to work. Or, you know, I've tried visas, or we've researched, that's the big thing. And they're not giving these visas outright, tourist visa. So those are some flags too. Don't ever let someone tell you that them coming over to make sure this is what they want to do. If they don't want that to see if it's going to work, that's a red flag, because they don't intend then to grow with it, right? Because they're not even given that opportunity. And it's much cheaper, right? To do a tourist visa long-term too, right? But someone that's going to change their stripes really fast, they can't afford that, right? They can't afford to just be on a tourist visa. Does that make sense, right? Correct. They have to have something that's going to solidify them to be on this soil. So
when we're watching the show, what they showed us was Memphis really wants to get married on this first visit. What was the truth of that?
So I don't like, even, you know, with contracts and stuff like that, I don't know exactly any of that. I don't like to muddle in that, you know. Obviously I've said plenty of words. If anyone needs to look them up in the dictionary to figure out what I'm really saying behind that, that's the way I rather do it. And really just focus on like my truth and things that I've gone through, because I feel like that's, you know, the best bet, you know.
Because I'm wondering, when you were talking about kind of like red flags earlier, it made me think about Danielle and Johan. And the reason it made me think about them is because when the plan was presented, no, I'm going to move to the DR as opposed to you moving to the US, we saw his attitude change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I was just wondering, like, if you are a person who's dating internationally and you want to, you know, just check the validity of your relationship, the realness of your relationship, you could propose moving to their country and
Mm-hmm.
just see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
Or you could propose, let's travel together for some time in places where their money does convert well and see
Mm-hmm.
how you get treated in those situations.
Yep.
That's what I would suggest. But
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I think it's really important that we're having this conversation. And I think it's interesting, April, that you did bring up Danielle and Johan, because I know that they have made Danielle the villain in her seasons. And I think that it's interesting that they're like, oh, it's the bait and switch. And he always said that he wanted to come to America. Well, the interesting thing is, if you guys go back to her original first season, she always said that she wanted to move to the DR. Like, that is where she stood. And her first season, she was packing her stuff to go to the DR. So it's so interesting how things can get muddled up. And, you know, we've seen this on the show with plenty of couples, you know, the Mohammeds and Danielles, the Danielles and Johans. We're seeing it with Pedro and Chantel, even though, you know, that was a longer situation. But someone said it in the here it is. It's a business. Good for all women that women will stand up for each other. It can happen to everybody. And I think that that's a really important point because here we are talking about an issue that it's an issue of the heart, right? So you think that you're in love and you think that you found the one. And so, you know, we're rose glasses, you guys, you know, right? We're rose glasses and we're coming from that perspective, not thinking that we're going to be scammed, not thinking that we're going to be used, not thinking that we're going to be manipulated. And I want to circle back to what Memphis said about opening up too soon. Right. So if it's a business, like Borstar said, if someone is looking at this as A, how am I going to better my life? B, this is a business. C, I know all the hoops and hoorah-rahs and I can get this visa and not even have to change my lifestyle until I'm ready to bounce. And as soon as I get to America, guess what? I don't even have to, maybe I'll stay for like 30 days because I want to get situated, but then I can go to wherever I want to go. Those are important things to put in perspective, but it's hard to put it in perspective, in my opinion, in the moment because you don't realize that this person has ill intentions.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about, you know, what to look for, what to do if you find yourself in those situations, I think April and Memphis have given very clear and concise options, you know. Get a travel visa. See if they're like, hey, my love is so strong. I'll travel to be with you. Maybe I can only stay for 30 days, but
that's longer.
Let's try that. Maybe you say, hey, you know what? I want to be with you so much that I'll come live with you for X amount of time and see how they respond to that. I think it's really important to recognize all of those things, as well as I want to talk about the family component. Right? Because the family component, like Memphis says, you can't just say, hey, you know, the mom loves me, the dad loves me, the cousin loves me, they welcomed me, they've given me gifts, they're showering me with love and affection. But you know what? If you go back again, Borstar, if it's indeed a business, it's a business. And hey, guess what? If this person gets to America, not only have I seen it on the show, but I know that it's true. They're going to send money back to support the family, right? And where's that money coming from? In the first 90 days, it's definitely not coming from a K-1 visa holder who can't work until they get their visa. It could be coming from the CR1 visa holder if they found a job immediately. But who else does that leave? It leaves the American citizen, right? And we've already talked about like manipulating and the family loving you. So then you have a sense of like, oh my gosh, I have a sense of I have to take care of them. And then there's also that, hey, they get to America. Not only you're supporting their entire family back home, but guess what next happens? And April, you can speak on this after I say it to say it's true or not. But oftentimes I've heard that the next thing they want to do is bring their family over. So I want to sponsor my mom. I want to sponsor my dad. I want to sponsor even my cousin and my brother. And, you know, and I'm just putting it out there because I heard it and I saw it. So, you know, I'm not saying that this is the case for Lauren and Alexi, but, you know, Alexi talked about in the season how he wants to eventually have his parents come over to America. And so that's something that you have to absolutely consider in all of this. April?
Yeah, I think one of the other things that you would want to look at is, are they trying to match make your friends with their friends? If they are already making plans that have nothing to do with the place where you live. So if you live in Massachusetts or Tennessee and they keep talking about Florida and New York, and you know, it could be an issue of them not really knowing the geography of the US, but it also could be an indicator that they have no intention on really living with you.
And I also, now that I'm thinking about it, one of the things that would be important to look for as well is, are they creating issues where there were none before? And I think of Molly and her first husband. What was his name? Luis.
Les Louise, yes.
And how, you know, he got to Atlanta and literally, you guys, 30 seconds later, all of a sudden she's this, she's that. He doesn't.
Yeah, all of a sudden he was the Pope and she was a witch.
That's right. And then all of a sudden, he literally packed up his bags and was gone. And he knew exactly where he was going. He was going to New York. And oh, by the way, I have family in New York. Oh, do you really? Why is this the first time I'm hearing that? Right? So those are all the things that it's unfortunate that we as women, and again, I'm speaking from my perspective as a woman, you have to pay attention to these things. And especially if you're a professional, I would say, especially if you are a woman of a certain age, because there are men that target older women, right? So like the Debbies and the Yolandas, and you know, beautiful women, but still of a certain age that they think that they can specifically target. So those are all things that I think that we have to remember and keep in perspective. And it's unfortunate because we just want love.
But I do want to say, remember how I spoke about this congregation? They have some of these individuals to talk about different hints and things to do. Just like a germ, right? You get an antibiotic, right, to kill it. And then guess what it starts doing, right? It starts changing its stripes, right? So that it can start to resist the medication. Now we have to find better medication to cover that. What I'm telling you is that they're learning how to evolve, right? To fly under the line, right? Because now this is something that everybody knows. Oh, they go for older women, maybe more unattractive, blah, 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 blah. No, now it's like, it's all of us. I want women to realize that none of us are exempt. So if you think that you're professional and you're smart enough, your heart and your mind, they're two totally different organs. And so I just want people to be cognizant and knowing that just because you're book smart, don't mean that your heart ain't going to do something else. And you have to be careful, because just because you're young and you're beautiful doesn't mean that they're not scamming you too.
April, I'm going to go over to you. I want to talk about, so you have a child and you find out that you're in immigration fraudulent marriage. What do you do? And specifically, let's talk about this hate convention. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. So one of the problems that people might run into, depending on what country your partner or spouse is from, is worries about child abduction. you want to definitely be proactive, go to the courts, get custody established, get protection orders if you need to, get restrictions on whether or not your child can have a passport and who holds the passport, for which countries. If you have fear of that, you want to be possessive of your child's birth certificate so it can't be registered in another country.
I want to just take a minute, April.
Okay.
Memphis, you are loved. You are loved. And I know that this cannot be easy to share your story. And it's okay to be emotional. It's okay for this to be affecting you. It's okay. It's a release that you're doing here. And this vulnerability is helping someone else. And I know it's hard to be the example. I know it's hard to be the person that speaks out. And I know that your heart is broken and you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that myself, April, and the Melanated community support you. We love you, and we don't necessarily understand what you're going through, but we are here for you.
I know. I appreciate it. I just, you kick yourself, you just kick yourself.
Absolutely.
No, you just do. And so that's just what I do, on a day-to-day basis. And it's hard, because I'm not saying that, it was anyone's fault. It's just that, hey, I was weak, I was vulnerable, and now I have to, deal with the repercussions. And
it's a lot.
I don't want nobody else to have to deal with having a child and that being just unsettled all the time. That's all. So this is pretty much the reason why I'm talking, really. So I apologize.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize, because you know what? This is real. And you know what? Someone sitting somewhere watching this has gone through something similar or is in something similar. And as women, what I love is that we tend to support each other in the hard times, in the difficult times, and in the relatable times. I'm going to jump into the comments because I want to continue to show how much you're loved. Crystal says, you're so strong to help others by sharing your story. Becca is sending you love. Dolphin is saying, it's okay, baby. We got you. And Diana says, we support and love you, Memphis. And JMM55 says, so sorry that you got hurt, Memphis. I saw your season. I was excited initially because I live in Metro Detroit. Michigander? I don't know.
Yeah.
Canadian. I'm sorry already, you guys. I don't know. What is it? Michigander?
Yeah.
Listen, here, I'll tell you something. And y'all don't know this because it was on my Patreon, but I'm going to put myself out there. So, what was the other? Okay, so someone was saying something about Tennessee. I don't know what the story was, but I was doing some news and gossip about Tennessee, and then I couldn't even think of one city. I was like, what did I say, Vanessa? I don't know. I said something, and then Memphis, Nashville. I was like, yeah, I would never have gotten that. That's how crazy I am. Okay, so back to Memphis, my girl. You got this. Amsterdam. Oh, Amsterdam.
Yeah.
See, international, worldwide. Memphis. We've all gone through it one way or another. Yours was magnified by television. You are so real, and we are with you, Memphis.
Thank you.
Okay, Vanessa. Thank you. I said Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Whatever. Thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention. I did not know. It was embarrassing. I Googled and then read. So now I know, Music City.
So one of the things that I think that Memphis wants you guys to know, wants the world at large to know, is that custody rights revolving children are very different in other countries, particularly Muslim countries. And so that's something, if you're having a child with someone who has citizenship in one of those countries, you want to be cognizant of what those rules are and what rights you may or may not have in that country.
Oh, you're going to have to elaborate. So if you are in a Muslim country, what do those rules look like when it comes to a child?
So it depends on the actual country. One of the most restrictive is going to be Oman. In Oman, your children do not belong to you. They belong to the father. And if he says one of his other wife's names goes on that child's birth certificate, then that's what happens.
Yeah, that part. Oh, wow.
Tunisia is pretty restrictive. I was told that if I did go back to that country or an Arab country, that I could need a note saying that I have permission to take my daughter out of the country. Also, being the father, they have more rights usually than the mother.
So how do you, April, how do you protect yourself from something like that? Because I do watch a lot of true crime, as you guys know. And there have been, I think they call it custodial abduction. And oftentimes it's a situation where one of the parents is going through the custody issue and they realize the court is going to grant custody to the other parent, so they last minute take off. And one specific true crime that I'm thinking about, it was the mom that took the kid, and I can't remember where, but somewhere far, and hasn't been seen since. So the dad is kind of figure out what his rights are. So what can they, as citizens, can they do anything?
It's a very hard thing to control. If you know about it early enough, the best things you can do are not have that person listed on the birth certificate and passport control.
But but if you've had the child, can you unlist retroactively or no?
It's very difficult because at that point you're talking about terminating somebody's parental rights.
Okay,
so the best thing is just to never have them on the birth certificate.
Oh. But what if you think that this is my spouse?
If you've already got them on the birth certificate and you've already allowed them to have a passport for the other country, it's very hard to protect yourself against if they want to abduct your children.
Oh, wow. Oh, so much to think about, eh? There's like so much to think about. So, because if you, for example, let's say, I'm going to go back to Tom in Australia. If I'm like so in love with Tom and then I have a kid with Tom and I'm going to want to put his name on the certificate. It's not until later that I'm finding out that I'm in a fraudulent marriage. And so there's no resources. There's nothing I could do about it.
Australia, if you have a custody order in the US and they violate that custody order, Australia is going to work with you on the return of that child if they find that child is there against that custody order. But there are some countries that are not going to recognize your custody order in the US.
So then that is ours. Ours is like that. They don't recognize it. They don't have a treaty with the US. The Hague Convention that April was going to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the Hague Convention.
Yeah, if they're a treaty partner, then generally that means that you're going to get some assistance with child abduction issues, generally, not always. But if they're not, you're either hiring your own resources to basically kidnap your children back, or you're at the mercy of that person as to when you can see your child.
That sounds crazy to me. It sounds crazy to me.
It's a thing that people obviously don't know or think very much about when they choose to date internationally. Even if you are dating someone in a country that is, let's say, like this country is like Australia, if that person goes to Australia and very, very quickly goes through the courts there and gets paperwork in place that establishes them as the custodial parent, and they're presenting evidence, whether that's true or false, that you are a bad parent, it's a long road. That's a long battle.
I'm gonna go to the comments. Excuse me. 4-star saying, also, most of those countries do not work with the United States. April, is that true?
That's correct. well, I don't know if she's a she, but this person is referring to an earlier comment that they made where in Islamic rules, even if the country doesn't have that rule, the Islamic rule is above whatever the typical law is for that country. And that is that the man is in charge of the family. The man makes decisions for the family. So if the man has decided that the child needs to stay with him, then that must not be a very good mom. Or if he's put, in the case of Oman, he could put the child with one of the other wives. And that's his right to do that.
You know what? That's just not okay. I just think that's not okay. And it's crazy that we're in 2023 and we're having to think about all of these things. And there's so many moving parts. And I guess, April, one of the things that I want to touch on, and we don't have to do it right now, but before this is over, is like, what resources are there for people that find themselves in this situation? Like, what do you do? And especially, you know, in hard times where it costs money to do all the things that you need to do. What resources are there? Resources? Is there like a immigration? I don't know, like
immigration wise, there's really no resource for this. If you find any kind of resource for this, it is a grassroots organization that some women have started to try and assist other women.
So that's unfortunate. And I guess my idea right now that just popped in my head, and maybe if that exists and you're out there, definitely DM me or put it in the comment section. But for example, I know that there's a whole underground for people that have suffered from DV, right? And there's a whole network of women, and there are resources all across the country. I don't understand why there wouldn't be something like that for someone who finds themselves in a situation like this, especially when there are children involved, April.
I agree with you.
That's it. I mean, I'm not asking, I'm just saying, like, that sounds crazy. So if you're out there and you exist, I would love to help spread the word, and just contact me, and let's continue to not only educate ourselves, but also empower ourselves with knowledge so that we can help others. Right. And again, Memphis, I appreciate you sharing your story. I know it's not easy.
I'm sorry for crying like a baby.
You're fine.
You're absolutely fine. I gotta tell you, it makes you very relatable. It makes you really, really listen. Not everyone is going through something, and everyone's been through some crazy type of situation. And not everyone is willing to talk about it. So the fact that you're being vulnerable and open and sharing your story, and like, I mean, where was that person coming from? Across the world?
Amsterdam.
Yeah. Sitting here getting knowledge from you, Memphis. So that just shows the reach and how important this is. I want to go to Crystal. I've learned a lot, Memphis. Tatiana, please don't apologize for crying.
Thank you.
Borstar says, my mom is Dutch and my dad is Algerian, and they're still together. So to give some hope, it can work out also. Just be aware of the bad apples.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring up awareness to the bad apples. And, you know, the bad apples look like candied apples. Right? You bite into it, but you know how you're not supposed to bite into that is a perfect metaphor. Linda, hear me out. So you know how you're supposed to lick the caramel, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Lick the caramel?
I don't know how you bite it.
You're not supposed to bite it because it's too hard.
Is that a Canadian thing?
Okay, I'm going to go with it.
Yeah.
This is why you Americans are where you are. So you have to lick the caramel, right? And that takes time. This is
oh my goodness, no.
That takes time. Instead of just biting into it, when you bite into it, it's like hard on your teeth.
Doesn't it get like soggy-ish, like feeling? Like I don't know. No.
I just want the apple with the caramel. I don't want to lick the caramel off.
Y'all, you see what I have to deal with? I am trying to make a metaphor and a point, and these fools are talking about the actual apple. Oh Oh Lord. Oh Lord.
4-star between me and you that your comment. I'm like totally gonna text my ex who's Nigerian. I mean Algerian. See what we can get going.
You know what, April? You need to take several seats. Your ex is your ex for a reason.
Bring it back. Bring it back.
Oh, bless it.
Right? Okay, so we also too wanted to talk about is it VAWA?
VAWA.
VAWA.
It stands for the Violence Against Women's Act. And even though it has women in the title, it applies to women and men and says that if you have been the victim of abuse by your US citizen or resident spouse, that you can self-petition for residency without their assistance, without really even having any information about them. If you don't have it, you can self-petition for residency. So anyone who has recommended this to Hamza, to Hamza, would not be accurate. This is not the situation he's in. He's already been given a conditional residency. This is for people who have never been granted residency before.
Is this a situation with Eve? What's Eve's guy's name?
Eve and Muhammad.
Muhammad. So isn't this what he was trying to do? Wouldn't it fall under this?
So he is either doing VAWA or U visa because he did file domestic abuse charges against her, and apparently she did get arrested, if I remember.
Yeah, but fast forward, the charges were dropped. The allegations were found to be untrue. And so she's been cleared of all those charges. But he was, so let's talk about what the difference between VAWA and U visa are.
Mm-hmm. So VAWA, you have to have been married to a U.S. citizen or a resident. For a U visa, the offender could be anybody. It doesn't have to be your spouse. If you were the victim of a qualifying crime, then you can apply for residency via a U visa, which is it's a 3-step process. We won't get into all that.
Okay, so let's say I came to America on a tourist visa, and then I went to the bar and I got in a bar fight. Could I apply for the U visa?
If the police report says that you were the victim of felony assault or something in that state that can be interpreted as felony assault, then yes, because there's a list of qualifying crimes.
God, what
Simple
is
assault doesn't count.
happening right now? I can get a CR1 visa, conditional, and never step foot in the country. Or I could be like, hey, I'm going to come to America. Let me just get a travel visa. And then I'm going to get like...
I'm going to blow your mind a little bit more.
I'm going to get loaded and get in a fight and get the knocked out of me and then go back and be like, hey, by the way, I want to stay here because that person felony assaulted me.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on right now?
I'm going to take it further. You ready?
I'm ready.
The fact that the charges against her were dismissed doesn't preclude him from getting a residency via U visa.
Stop it. Stop it. So then let me add to it. I can go to the bar, not actually get in a fight. I could just fall on the ground, like how some people go to the grocery store and sue the grocery store because they tripped on their own feet. I could be like, oh, I fell on the ground, but Melanie over there, she punched me in the face. So then no one can prove that she did it. She gets charged. They find out that I'm a big fat liar. And I'm still like, but hey, I get my U visa. Oh my God, that is...
So it would be up to, there are 2 people who could stop it. And the first step, the police have to sign off saying that you were a victim of a crime and that you were helpful to their investigation. They have 100% discretion on whether they sign off on these or not. There's no like appeal process if they refuse to sign off on it. So that could be a stopping point. If the police are like, yeah, we're not signing it, then that's the end of it. But if they sign it, then it goes on to USCIS. And then USCIS, whichever officer reviews that file, makes the decision whether or not to grant it. So it can not get processed, but the fact that the charges are withdrawn or dropped doesn't preclude it from going forward. And the reason for that is, honestly, it's to protect people on the other side of the equation, because there are a lot of women who end up being victims of abuse, and then they go and have the charges withdrawn against the other person. And it's supposed to help them not be penalized for having battered women syndrome.
I'm smiling, and not because of that, because that's a very serious topic. But Boris Star said, okay, who wants to get into a bar fight with me?
There is actually, like, if you guys are TikTokers, there is a group of people who make hilarious jokes about getting in fights because they're undocumented.
See, why? I mean, why is this not more common knowledge, you guys?
It's horrible. It's horrible. I mean, this is the thing. I, like, you guys are talking about the show. I didn't even watch but maybe 2 episodes. Couldn't even bear it. So, I don't know what has gone on with other couples and things of that nature. But I have had people send to me, snippets. And it's very, very strange and kind of comical to me that the individual in my situation would be laughing at, like, I guess, the Eve guy. And then I heard he said something else, like, about Jasmine. And it's like, it's so crazy that you would want to display yourself, but when someone feels like they're up here and they play the game so well, they start showing that arrogance. And it's very weird that, women, we don't stay together enough, right? You look at me and then you look at him and they're like, oh yeah, he's the victim, but when someone looks better, right, you tend to have, or people think that he looks better, then I don't know what it is about women. They will still continue to praise that individual and not know anything about him, So I just go, it's just, it's crazy.
I'm going to take it one step further, and this is a controversial issue for some, but not for me, because I am a Black woman. I may be Canadian, but I am a Black woman.
I was about to say this, Linda. Let's go.
What?
I'm just saying, like, okay, because I'm about to go on a tangent. I feel it, so I'll say this. So oftentimes, a lot of the times, Black women are not appreciated. They're not respected. They're villainized. They're put in a stereotype that is 99.999% of the time untrue. Mm-hmm. And so it's very rare that you see, if there is a 2-party, 3-party, 4-party, however many parties involved in a situation, where people are going to come and support the Black woman. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. Mm-hmm. So if something happened, it's the Black girl's fault. If there is a dispute, it's the Black girl's fault. And it's because, without me getting totally crazy with it, it's because we have been stereotyped for so many years. We can talk about what standards of beauty is, and, other. I'm just saying that oftentimes Black women are not supported, and they're made to look bad when indeed perhaps they're the victim. So next time you see a story, whatever the story is, there's a Black woman involved, maybe research a little bit more before you jump to conclusions because the other party, like Memphis says, looks good or is exotic or is the standard of what the colonizer says is beauty. That's it. Go ahead, April.
What we see specifically on 90 Day Fiancé a lot of times is that Black women who appear on the show are looked at as being undeserving of love and undeserving of protection and just a mule for everybody else to pile on. We see this time and time again when we watch people on the show. We very rarely get to see a Black woman become a beloved character. Yeah. No matter what their attitude is. We have a woman who's currently on the show who speaks fluent her partner's language and gets no credit for it. No credit for it. And whether the person presents wearing a weave or they present wearing braids, they get torn down for their hair, for their makeup. On this show in particular, and Match Me Abroad, we have women who have done so much internal work an internal healing for themselves and are kind to other people, and they still get thrashed and called ghetto and lazy. And how can you say that about the women that we've seen? They're all accomplished, you know? So it's just a reflection of greater society that just doesn't see women as whole human beings. We're still fighting from a 3/5 standpoint.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad that you guys touched on that too, because this was a thing that, you know, I was a foster kid, right? Homeless, all of that. I worked so hard to get to where I was. And after that show, um, I had false accusations about people who said that they were my patients. And I literally had to have, you know, had to go to the network and say, hey, this is what's going on. And they had to investigate to take those things down. But it's like, for people who don't know you to look at this, you know, a TV show or see you on TV and feel the need to try to take away your reputation as a provider. Oh man, that just hurt me so bad. I just was like, wow, like you guys don't even know how much, you know, I clawed out of, you know, a grave to be where I'm at. And now you want to just swipe that away from me and my family. So I think that that is really bad. And I hope that anyone, you know, who thinks of, you know, doing certain things, read your contracts and just do your homework on any and everything that you do. Cause, you know, you don't want to end up, you know, in a place where, you know, you're still fighting. I shouldn't be now, you know?
Well, that was a lot right there for me. Um, what else do we want to cover? And you guys, as we start to wrap this up, if you have questions in the live chat, please feel free to go ahead and pop them in. And if you're watching the replay, definitely put the comments in or your question in the comments, and we will come back to them. Specifically April, because she is the expert. I can give you my opinion because, you know, that's what I do. But in all seriousness, April, I'll start with you, April. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
I do want to cover one last thing, and that is if you're moving from the 2-year conditional residency to the 10-year residency, but you're no longer with your partner, and you're requesting a waiver of that joint filing, there are 5 specific exceptions that the waiver covers. Death of your partner, if you entered into a bona fide marriage, but despite it being bona fide, it ended in divorce, and you have to prove all of that. If you entered into the marriage in good faith, but you were abused by your partner, if it would be you're no longer with the person, but it would be a hardship for you to return to your home country for whatever reason. That hardship can be based on your life in the US or based on factors that are happening in your home country or a combination of both. And I'm missing one. I'll put it in the comments because I'm missing one. Oh, the last exception is not dealing with the spouse. The last exception is dealing with if you were the child who came in and you received a conditional residency and you were abused by your step parent. That's also an exception where you can get a waiver of that joint filing. Linda, you're muted.
Memphis, is there something else that you want to cover before I move into the questions?
No. Go ahead.
All right. First question is from Vanessa. Vanessa says, what part of this whole thing evokes the most emotion for you, Memphis? What hurt you the most, the relationship or how you were treated in the media?
The relationship. And it wasn't the relationship. It was how I was treated within that. When you give someone an option to exit in some capacity without, like, you know, talking too openly about it. So yes, within the relationship and now the lagging with the minor child, that's what's hurting the most.
April, unmute. Are there any resources that you can recommend for us to learn more about these issues?
Now, Are you referring, Tatiana, to immigration or like red flags and international dating?
So while we wait to hear from Tatiana, you guys, I absolutely appreciate you guys, all of you being here and your great questions. And I really want to take a moment to thank you, April, for your wisdom, your knowledge, and helping bring awareness to such an important issue. April, if someone wants to reach out to you and finds themselves in some type of situation where they need immigration legal advice, where can they find you?
You can find me if you go on my YouTube page, in my bio, there's a link where you can schedule a free consultation with me. You can also find that on my Instagram, which is April R. Holloway. Well, yeah, at April R. Holloway. Or my business Instagram, which is at Holloway Legal PLLC.
Perfect. Coming back to Tatiana, about the resources that you recommend us to learn more about these issues when it comes to red flags in international dating.
Well, I recommend that you follow Memphis because she's going to start dropping dime on all of the red flags that we need to know. Little by little, you're going to be coming out with more stuff, just kind of, you have a schedule or kind of sporadically.
So I'm trying to figure that out, because obviously you see I'm not really socially savvy. I'm a little bit more, so I have to kind of work on how to kind of start getting that stuff out, but I need to soon. So I don't know. I'm going to start thinking about how to present it. So soon.
Perfect. In the meantime, you guys, go ahead and subscribe to all of us, Memphis, April, and myself. And we'll promise we'll continue to bring these important issues to light. And maybe, down the road, we'll have a part 2 and talk about where do we go from here. In the meantime, you guys, thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Head over to April's page at Holloway Legal PLLC. People are excited already. Oh, great, Memphis. I'll be looking for that. So proud of you,
Thank
Memphis. You guys will be back. And in the meantime, happy Friday and spread the knowledge. Oh, you know what? You guys are going to make me cry. They're really, thank you. People are saying, like, sharing your story, Memphis, and April giving us, what the rights are is amazing. Oh, Lord, there's still more going. If you're from abroad, do we need to get into a bar fight first for free consultation? Oh, you are still stuck on that. Listen, you better stay. It's not worth it. All right, you guys, thank you so much. The live chat is ridiculous.